Hey guys, this is Jonathan Robbins. I'm the lead pastor at the Summit Church in Kernersville, North Carolina, which is near Winston Salem, kind of in the center of the state. We're going to be covering real quickly here competency number 8, which is to be intentional about discipleship and leadership development. About 5 years ago, our church plant was in its 5th or 6th year, and we'd been growing pretty quickly, and I'd noticed that we had gotten really complicated at the same time. And we're about 500 people or so, and people were asking for more and more things. Can we have this? Can we do this ministry? Can we do this program? And it's hard to say no to people that are really excited about a lot of good things. So I turned around and realized that we had, in addition to all the weekend stuff that we were doing, a midweek service, women's ministry, men's ministry. We had elective classes going on and all this stuff, and we were worn out. We were very busy, but we were not being very effective at training people, at making disciples, at reaching people. I mean, we had crowds coming in, but as far as spiritual growth came, it wasn't really happening like we had wanted to happen. So what we ended up doing was just stopping all of that, except for what we were doing on the weekends for a period of time, and we started over, completely wiped the slate clean to come up with a strategy to help us be intentional about leadership development and discipleship development. So this is what we're going to talk about, and here's what we knew, and here's what you guys know. In Acts chapter 2, what they were doing are the kinds of things that we needed to find a way to do. In other words, the fellowship, the teaching, the worship, the prayer, the serving, the giving, those were things that were extremely vital to their growth and development and had to be to us and are going to have to be to you guys as well. So we had to figure out a way to do this. Every church and every church plant has got to be a church that both reaches people and teaches and trains people to grow closer to Christ. You can't just say, oh, we're just going to reach people or we're just going to teach people. No, you got to do it both. So I want to give you 4 things that I think are principles to keep in mind to help you become intentional about discipleship and leadership development. Number 1, what's important must be intentional. And that's what we came to that point back about 5 or 6 years ago. This was important to us. We had to make it very intentional. We had to come up with a system or a process, because if it's important to us, we have to make it into a system, make it intentional. And guys, let me be honest with you, your preaching on Sunday morning is not a system. No matter how good of a communicator you're not good enough of a communicator for that to take the place of, hey, people can just come and listen to me and that's all they need. No, they need more than what you can give them. They need a way to be able to walk to the next step, to know what that next step is. And so if it's important to train people to have a development process, then you've got to make it a system, or it's just not going to get done. Plus, you can't measure what you're doing. So I would say take some time to find a way to build a system that fits your context. Don't try to copy somebody else's, not even ours, but find somebody or find a way where you can get along with God and maybe take some notes from some other people, but find a system that fits your context. Number 2, simple is sustainable. When it comes to discipleship and leadership development, simple is sustainable. Now, simple doesn't mean easy. Simple doesn't mean simplistic. It just means you can understand it and you can follow it and you know what's next. People have to know what's next. And your church, like my church, like everybody's church, are going to drift into complexity. They just will. Every organization, every church drifts into complexity, and you have to fight hard to keep things simple. And if it's simple, you can communicate it. If it's simple, you can say it over and over and over again in a way that people catch it, they get it. Following Jesus, we say this a lot around here, that following Jesus will eventually be hard to do, but it should never be hard to understand. Keep things simple. Simple is sustainable. Number 3, you need to be thinking environments, not just events. Think environments when it comes to discipleship and leadership development. See, an event is one and done. You come to the event and then it's done, and now what? Or a class, you come to a class and the class is done, and now what? The next class. But eventually you're taking all the classes, then what? And we found out that an event is not the best way to do this kind of development. It's thinking about environments, creating an atmosphere where growth naturally and development naturally happens on the leadership level and the personal discipleship level. Just like a plant in soil, when the conditions are right, it just naturally grows. When people are in an environment or an atmosphere where the conditions are right, they will just naturally grow and go to the next step, go to the next level. And here at the Summit, we have created 3 environments. We have our worship environment, we have our groups environment, and we have serving environments. And we believe if we get people into those environments, then they can grow as much as they possibly need to grow. You'll never outgrow these environments. You'll never outgrow an environment. You will outgrow a system based upon events. So think environments, not just events. Fourthly, think process, not position. Think process, not position. When you're thinking about just filling positions, here's a slot, here's a hole, needs to be filled with a volunteer, that's not a good way to develop a discipleship process or leadership process, because oftentimes, you know, in church planning, you just look for a warm body, you put them in the slot, you put them in the hole, and you do that, and doesn't necessarily mean they can lead. And that's nothing more frustrating than having all the people you need to do everything you need to do, but nothing's getting done because they can't lead. I mean, they're in the position, but they can't do anything. There was no process to equip them, to mentor them, to train them. And so process is about you understanding that developmental process, the discovery process, and being diligent with that over time. It's the mentoring, it's the coaching, and early on in the planting days, that's just you, one-on-one, doing just about all of it. But eventually gathering other people around that you train, who can train others. And you ought to ask Mac about his leadership pipeline, because that's some of the best stuff that I've ever heard when it comes to this topic of leadership development. This is messy. It's time-consuming, but it's well worth it. And that's what I want to leave you guys with. Some of the hardest work you'll ever do is training leaders and developing people spiritually, but it's well worth it. There's nothing like seeing people intentionally walking with Christ, going to the next level all along the way. My prayer is that you'll get along with God and with your team and come up with a system that you can be intentional with, that is simple, where you're creating the right environments and you're thinking about process. So, God bless you.